At my daughter's wedding. Her groom, Mitchell, looked me dead in the eye, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Who let the local homeless man in?" His parents burst out laughing. The guests froze mid-toast. My daughter's smile faltered, her champagne flute trembling slightly in her hand. I just smiled, not because it didn't hurt. Oh, it did, but because I knew something they didn't. And when I finally took the microphone later that night, I said just one sentence that made every face in that room go pale white. But before that moment of truth, I remember standing outside the harbor room doors, my hand resting on the brass handle for 3 long seconds. I could hear laughter echoing from inside, the kind that dripped with wealth and entitlement. I smoothed my old navy blazer, the same one I wore at my retirement dinner, and stepped inside. "Ah, you must be Max," Mitchell said, his eyes scanning me from my shoes to my collar. That microsecond of judgment, sharp and silent, told me everything I needed to know about him. His handshake was brief, limp, obligatory. "Glad you could make it," he said, his lips pulling into what he probably thought was a polite smile. "Judy mentioned you, prefer comfortable attire." My daughter, Judy, rushed up and kissed my cheek. "Hi, Dad, you found it okay?" I chuckled softly. "Judy, I've lived in Charleston for 63 years. I know where the restaurants are." We sat down, Mitchell and Judy side by side, me across from them. It felt more like a job interview than dinner with family. Mitchell had positioned himself next to my daughter deliberately, framing me as the outsider. I recognized that trick instantly. I'd used it in interrogation, rooms countless times back in my days at the district attorney's office. "Judy tells me you recently retired," Mitchell began, swirling his wine like he was tasting liquid gold. "Last year," I said calmly. 30 years in the prosecutor's office." He smirked slightly. "That must be quite an adjustment." "Different pace, I imagine." "Different," I replied. "Not slower." Judy placed her hand gently on his arm. "Mitchell just closed a massive investment deal." "Tell Dad about it, honey." He perked up immediately. "We restructured a portfolio worth $8 million last quarter." "Numbers don't lie," he said, leaning back confidently. "Unlike people in courtrooms." I didn't take the bait. I just smiled and took a sip of water. Judy laughed, but it was nervous, forced. "Dad worked some big cases too," she said softly, though her voice lacked conviction. She was defending me out of obligation, not pride. Mitchell didn't even look at me. His eyes trailed the waiter behind my shoulder. "I'm sure," he said dryly, "though I suspect prosecution doesn't exactly translate to private sector compensation." There it was. The condescension masked as small talk. The pitying smirk that said, "You're beneath me." For the next 40 minutes, the pattern was the same. I'd start a sentence, Mitchell would interrupt. Judy would smile nervously, trying to bridge the silence. He bragged about his firm, his clients, their new penthouse, the wedding venue everyone wanted but few could afford. And through it all, I sat quietly, calm, polite, almost invisible, because I'd learned something over decades of interrogations and trials. People reveal their character when they think you're powerless. When the waiter brought the bill, Mitchell didn't even glance my way. "I've got it," he said loudly, as if doing charity work. "No worries, Max. You can cover dessert next time." I smiled. Of course. Next time. But deep down I already knew there wouldn't be a next time. Because the next time I saw him would be on his wedding day, and by then the truth I carried would shatter everything he thought. He knew about who the homeless man really was. The sun over Charleston Harbor burned bright that morning, painting the waves in gold. Luxury yachts bobbed lazily beyond the glass windows of the riverside estate, the venue Mitchell's family had rented for the big day. Every detail screamed money: the imported roses, the champagne tower, even the string quartet playing at the entrance. I walked toward the doors with my hands tucked in my pockets. My old navy blazer pressed clean. My shoes shined, though they'd seen better years. Around me, guests stepped out of sleek cars, women in shimmering gowns, men in tailored suits that probably cost more than my month's pension. I heard the whispers before I even stepped inside. "Is that her father?" "He looks like a driver." "Did he come alone?" Each word landed softly but cut deep. Still, I kept walking. I'd faced far worse in my career. Men with blood on their hands, liars who tried to manipulate truth. These people? They were amateurs. Then I saw Judy, my daughter, glowing in her white gown. For a second, the world stilled. My heart ached with pride and grief all at once. She was beautiful, radiant, but her eyes flickered when she saw me. A brief flash of discomfort, like my presence was something to manage, not celebrate. "Dad," she said, her voice strained but polite. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, smiling softly. Behind her, Mitchell appeared, perfectly groomed, his tux tailored to precision. His mother, dripping with diamonds, stood beside him. His father clasped his shoulder, nodding approvingly. When Mitchell saw me, his smirk returned, the same one from that restaurant. "Well, look who showed up," he said loudly, enough for those nearby to hear. "I was worried you couldn't find the place. GPS isn't always kind to, locals." Laughter rippled through the small circle of guests around him. Judy's face paled. "Mitchell!" she hissed under her breath. But he wasn't done. He looked me over once again, the same scanning eyes, the same judgment. "Sir," he said mockingly, "thank you for dressing comfortably. Keeps the event grounded, I suppose." Someone chuckled. Another guest tried to stifle a grin, and just like that, the whispers spread again. I could feel the eyes on me, the pity, the superiority, the assumption that I was some washed-up father barely scraping by. I smiled, that same quiet smile that unnerved people in court. "Comfort," I said, adjusting my tie, "comes from knowing who you are, son. Clothes have nothing to do with it." Mitchell blinked, unsure how to respond. His mother's lips tightened, and his father muttered something about class. I didn't linger. I simply nodded to Judy and took my seat near the back, where the older relative sat. The ceremony began, white petals falling, the officiant's voice soft, vows exchanged like poetry rehearsed for social media. But even from the last row, I could feel the air shift. Every time someone whispered about the father in the cheap suit, I sat silently through the entire thing, my heart heavy yet calm. Because the truth has a way of waiting, and I knew my moment was coming. When the toast began, Mitchell stood first. He thanked his parents for their generosity, his business partners for their support, and finally turned his gaze toward me. "And to my father-in-law," he said, smiling wide, "thank you for reminding us where humble beginnings come from." Laughter again, polite this time, the kind that hurts worse because it hides cruelty under etiquette. Judy's smile faltered, her eyes darting toward me. But I lifted my glass anyway. "To beginnings," I said quietly, because they had no idea. The beginning they mocked was about to be the ending of their illusion. The truth I'd kept buried for years wasn't just powerful, it was their undoing. The ballroom lights shimmered off crystal chandeliers as laughter filled the air. Waiters glided between tables, carrying trays of champagne and tiny whores, d'oeuvres with names I couldn't pronounce. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of wealth, gold accents, silk table runners, champagne flutes etched with the couple's initials. Everything was perfect. Everything except the truth. I sat quietly at the back, my glass of sparkling water in hand, while others toasted with champagne worth more than my monthly pension. I didn't mind. I'd never been one for appearances. My satisfaction came from substance, and there was very little of that in this room. Judy's table, front and center, overflowed with executives, lawyers and investors. Mitchell's colleagues, his father, a real estate developer, spoke about legacy and class. His mother chimed in about marrying into potential. Then, as if on cue, Mitchell stood up again, his voice echoing through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who made this day possible, especially Judy's dad, Max, who, truly embodies the spirit of humility." A few guests chuckled. He smirked, emboldened by the attention. "When Judy first told me about her father, I imagined a retired judge or someone established. But then I met him and realized success can mean different things to different people. Some measure it in numbers, others in experience." Polite laughter again. The kind that stings worse than insults. Judy's eyes darted toward me, silently pleading for patience. She knew that tone, the way Mitchell was performing, playing to the crowd, feeding his ego with subtle cruelty. I just smiled, resting my hands on my cane. Let him talk. Let him dig the hole deeper. Mitchell raised his glass dramatically. "To those who taught us what not to become." This time, laughter erupted around the room. His father clapped him on the back. His mother beamed with pride. Even some of the bridesmaids giggled behind their napkins. I took a slow breath. I could have stood up right then. Could have shattered their smug little bubble with a single fact. But years as a prosecutor had taught me something precious. Timing wins every case. So I sat there quiet as stone, sipping my water while Mitchell's laughter filled the room. Judy leaned over, whispering sharply, "Mitchell, stop it." "That's enough." He waved her off, smiling like a man untouchable. "Relax, babe. Everyone's having fun." Fun? That word echoed in my mind like a dull blade. I had spent my life fighting for truth, sending criminals to prison, and building a quiet fortune from side investments that no one here knew existed. To them I was a nobody, a retired civil servant with nothing to show. I'd chosen to live modestly after retirement, not because I had to, but because peace mattered more than parading wealth. But now, as Mitchell's laughter echoed across the room, I realized this wasn't about pride anymore. This was about dignity. The DJ's microphone squealed slightly as he announced the next segment. The open toasts. Anyone who'd like to share a few words for the happy couple, please come forward. Mitchell leaned back in his chair, looking around smugly. "Go on, Dad," he said to his father. "Say something inspirational." But before his father could stand, I rose. The room quieted instantly. Even the string quartet stopped mid-note. I walked slowly toward the stage, my footsteps measured, deliberate. Every pair of eyes followed me, some curious, some embarrassed, others amused. When I reached the microphone, I adjusted it slightly and looked around the glittering hall. Mitchell chuckled under his breath, whispering something to his best man. His mother crossed her arms. Judy looked torn between fear and hope. I cleared my throat and smiled. "First," I began, "thank you all for being here today to celebrate love, family, and truth." A few heads turned. Someone laughed nervously. "It's true," I continued. "I may not look like I belong in a room like this. Not in the way you think, anyway. But I've learned that appearances—" I paused, my eyes locking with Mitchell's. "Can be deceiving." The laughter stopped. The room fell silent. Mitchell straightened in his chair, his smirk fading just a touch. "See, before I retired, I spent 30 years in the district attorney's office. Most of that time I was investigating people who built empires on lies, fraud, and stolen money. I've seen a lot of faces that looked successful." My voice dropped an octave, until I pulled the records. Whispers rippled across the tables. Mitchell's father shifted uncomfortably. I smiled softly. "But tonight isn't about work. It's about family, and how sometimes the truth finds its way home, even when people try to bury it." I raised my glass slowly. "So, to the happy couple, may your marriage be built on honesty, because everything else eventually comes crashing down." The guests didn't clap. They didn't laugh. They just stared, waiting, uneasy. Mitchell forced a grin. "Wow, quite the speech, Max," he said tightly. "Didn't know you moonlighted as a motivational speaker." I smiled. "Oh, I do a bit of everything, Mitchell. You'd be surprised what I know." And as I turned to return to my seat, Mitchell's father whispered something urgently in his ear. And for the first time that night, Mitchell's confidence wavered, because he suddenly realized maybe this local homeless man wasn't as harmless as he seemed. The clinking of glasses faded. The quartet tried to resume playing, but even the soft melody couldn't smooth over the tension that had crept into the air like smoke. I returned to my seat, slow and steady, as eyes followed me. The same people who had been laughing minutes ago now whispered behind napkins. Judy sat frozen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her smile trembling like glass ready to break. Mitchell kept laughing, too loudly now, too forced. "Folks, don't mind Max here," he said with a nervous chuckle. You know how speeches go, a little too dramatic sometimes. No one responded. Even his friends didn't join in this time. They just looked from him to me, curiosity flickering in their eyes. I leaned back in my chair and watched as a waiter refilled Mitchell's glass. He took a big sip, clearly trying to wash down the unease crawling up his throat. He leaned over to his father, whispering harshly. What the hell did he mean by that? His father, Howard, kept his eyes fixed on me. "You idiot," he muttered. "That name Maxwell Porter sound familiar?" Mitchell frowned. "What are you talking about?" Howard's face had gone pale. "If he's who I think he is, we've got a problem." I didn't need to hear every word to know the panic beginning to bloom. I'd seen it countless times, that flicker of realization, when arrogance meets reality. The waiter passed by again, and Howard's hand trembled as he reached for his drink. "Mitchell," he hissed under his breath. "The DA's office. 30 years. Doesn't that sound familiar? There was a man, Porter, who—" "Dad," Mitchell interrupted, rolling his eyes. "You're being paranoid. He's just—" Before he could finish, a man in a dark suit approached me. His handshake was firm, respectful. "Mr. Porter," he said, "it's been a long time. I didn't expect to see you here." Heads turned. "Ah," I said calmly, standing up. "Detective Harris." I could say the same. "Didn't know you were invited." "I wasn't," the detective replied, glancing at Mitchell's table. But when I heard who the groom was, I thought I should see for myself. Mitchell's face drained of color. "Detective," he repeated. "What's going on?" Harris gave a polite smile. "Relax, son. I'm off duty, just paying my respects to an old mentor." The murmurs began again, this time sharper, buzzing with confusion. "Mentor? DA's office? Mentor in what exactly?" I raised my glass, my smile never faltering. "Mitchell, do you remember that investment firm your father runs? The one that handles luxury developments across the harbor?" He froze. "Yeah, why?" "Funny thing," I continued. "A few years back, the district attorney's office received reports of some discrepancies, shell accounts, misappropriated funds, tax records that didn't quite match up." The air in the room thickened. Howard's hands were trembling now, his napkin shredded between his fingers. "I was assigned to oversee that investigation," I said softly. Of course, everything was eventually handled quietly. No names released to the press. But it's strange how small the world can be. Mitchell's mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Howard," she whispered, "what is he talking about?" Howard shot to his feet. "That's enough," he barked, his voice cracking. "You have no right to." I stood slowly, calm as a man watching a storm he predicted years ago. "I have every right," I said evenly. "Because I was the one who protected your family from the headlines. I was the one who made sure your son never had to know what you did." Silence. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Judy's voice trembled. "Dad, what are you saying?" I looked at her gently. "I'm saying, sweetheart, that the man you're marrying, the one who mocked me for being beneath him is standing on wealth built from a deal that should have landed his father in prison, a deal I buried out of respect for you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras stopped flashing. Mitchell's face went sheet white, his jaw trembling. Howard stammered, You can't prove—" "Oh, I can," I said. "But I won't, because I didn't come here for revenge." I turned to Judy, my voice softening. "I came here to remind you that respect isn't bought. It's earned. And you never mock a man whose silence kept your world from burning." I stepped away from the mic, the silence deafening behind me. Mitchell tried to laugh, his voice cracking. "You're bluffing. All of this is crazy." But he wasn't fooling anyone. His hands shook. His father's face was gray, and I could see it in their eyes. The exact moment they realized the so-called homeless man they'd humiliated was the one who'd once saved their entire empire. The ballroom was a battlefield now, but no one was shouting. It was that heavy, unbearable silence that follows an explosion. You could almost hear the truth settling into every corner of the room. The chandeliers above glistened like witnesses, catching the trembling light from people's phones, still frozen mid-record. Judy stood at the edge of the stage, her bouquet shaking in her hands. "Dad, is this true?" she whispered, her voice breaking through the still air. Howard didn't answer. He couldn't. His lips moved, but no sound came out, only guilt. Thick, suffocating guilt. Mitchell turned toward his father, his face crumpling. "What the hell is he talking about, Dad?" "Tell her it's a lie!" Howard pressed his palm to his forehead, sweat glistening. "Mitchell, please." "Not here, not now." "So it's true," I said quietly. "You used her wedding to flaunt the very wealth that came from hiding the truth." Howard slammed a hand on the table. "You think you're some kind of hero? You think revealing this now makes you righteous?" I looked at him steadily. "No, I think it makes me honest. Something you stopped being a long time ago." Judy dropped her bouquet. It hit the marble floor with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than any shout could. She turned to her fiancé. "Mitchell, did you know?" Mitchell's lips parted, but the words never came. His eyes darted between me, his father, and the guests, faces filled with judgment, confusion, and disgust. I took a breath. "I'm sorry it had to come out like this, Judy. I really am. But when a man is humiliated in front of everyone he loves, sometimes silence becomes too heavy to carry." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us. You protected our family, and I let him humiliate you." I stepped closer, my voice low. "You were blinded by love. But love built on lies doesn't last. And one day, you were going to see it for yourself. I just gave you that day sooner." The guests began to murmur again, this time more openly. Someone whispered, "That's the DA's investigator from the harbor scandal." Another voice said, "So it was true all along." Howard's wife stood abruptly, her face ashen. "Howard," she said in a shaking voice, "is this what our life is built on?" "Stolen money." "Margaret, please," he begged, but it was no use. The truth had shattered every polished lie they'd built together. Mitchell turned on me suddenly, fury replacing fear. "You ruined my wedding," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. "No," I said calmly. "You ruined it the moment you thought humiliating someone would make you look powerful." The words hit him harder than a punch. He took a step back, speechless. Judy turned to me, her eyes filled with both sorrow and gratitude. "I don't know what to say, Dad." I smiled softly. "Say nothing. Just live honestly from now on. That's enough." I picked up my coat from the chair. People parted as I walked past, whispering, filming. Frozen, not out of pity, but out of respect. As I reached the grand doors, I heard Judy's voice behind me, soft, trembling, but strong. "Dad, thank you." I stopped, turned halfway, and gave her a faint smile. "Be proud of who you are, Judy, not of what others make you feel you should be." Then I walked out, leaving behind the chandeliers, the whispers, and a family finally forced to face their own reflection. Outside, the evening air felt cleaner, sharper, like freedom. I stood there for a moment under the pale glow of the wedding lights, breathing in the cold truth of it all. The night had started with me being mocked, and ended with the masks of every powerful man in that hall falling to the floor. And for the first time in years, I walked away not as the disgraced investigator they buried, but as the man who finally set himself free. By the time I reached the parking lot, the night had grown still, eerily still. The distant hum of the ocean echoed through the harbor, blending with the faint notes of wedding music that still played inside, like a record spinning after the party had already died. I leaned against my car and looked back at the glowing ballroom windows. Shadows moved frantically inside. Arguments, accusations, and broken promises were unfolding in real time. The same people who laughed at my old blazer an hour ago were now tearing each other apart in designer suits. I watched for a long moment, then opened my phone. Dozens of notifications were already popping up. Videos from the wedding were flooding social media. Guests had uploaded everything, from Mitchell's insult to my revelation. One clip already had over 200,000 views with the caption, "Father of the bride exposes billionaire fraud at his own daughter's wedding." I exhaled slowly. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was peace, a calm that had been absent for years. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, old colleagues, even a few people from the district attorney's office. One message stood out. "You were right all along. Max, the harbor development files are being reopened. Howard Collins is under investigation again." I stared at it for a while, not smiling, just breathing. Justice, long buried under money and manipulation, had finally started clawing its way back. Later that week, the news broke officially. Financial consultant Howard Collins, under federal probe, possible fraud in harbor investments. Images of the wedding leaked everywhere. The once untouchable family was now splashed across every major outlet. Howard resigned from his board position the same day. Mitchell's firm lost its biggest clients overnight. And Judy showed up at my doorstep that evening. She looked exhausted, makeup smeared, her eyes swollen from crying. But for the first time in years, she looked real. "I didn't know, Dad," she whispered. I swear I didn't know any of it. I nodded, motioning her inside. "I know, sweetheart. Sit down." She did, and then she broke down completely, not from shame, but from relief. "All those years I thought you gave up after retirement. I thought you just stopped trying. I never knew how much you carried." I poured her some tea, my hands steady now. "The truth doesn't need to rush, Judy. It always finds its way home." We sat there quietly, just the sound of the clock ticking between us. For the first time since she was a teenager, she reached out and held my hand. "I'm sorry I let them laugh at you," she whispered. "You don't need to be sorry," I said softly. "You just needed to see who they really were." Outside, the world was already shifting. The Collins family's empire was crumbling. But inside that small living room, ours was being rebuilt. Later that night, after Judy left, I walked onto my porch and looked at the harbor lights. The same place where my reputation had once been buried now, shimmered like an old friend returning home. I thought about my late wife, how she used to say, "Max, the truth walks slow, but it never gets lost." She'd been right all along. Some truths don't destroy and they cleanse. As the breeze rolled in from the ocean, I whispered to myself, "You'd have been proud tonight. Linda, you really would." The stars above seemed to answer with quiet approval. I closed my eyes, letting the peace of that moment soak in. The man who'd walked into that wedding was mocked, dismissed, and humiliated. The man who walked out was finally free. 2 months passed after the wedding. The storm had finally settled, though the ripples still reached far. Howard Collins and his son Mitchell were no longer the talk of Charleston for their lavish parties. They were now the headline of every financial scandal in the state. Father and son charged in $12 million harbor investment fraud. Exposed at daughter's wedding, truth catches up with the Collins dynasty. Their photos flooded every news site. The same confident smirk that once sneered at me across the wedding table was now printed under the word disgraced. I didn't celebrate. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about balance. And finally the scales had evened. That morning Judy stopped by again. No expensive car, no diamond bracelet this time, just a tired young woman in a gray hoodie, holding 2 cups of coffee. She looked around my small house, smiling faintly. "It's peaceful here." "It always has been," I said, taking the cup from her. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun rise through the window, the same window where her mother used to sit and read every Sunday morning. "Dad," she began softly, "the company's gone. Mitchell's family. They've lost everything. He's trying to make deals to avoid prison." I nodded. "He'll face what he earned. We all do, sooner or later." Judy looked down. "And me?" "I don't know where to go from here." I placed my hand over hers. Rough, oil-stained hands that had fixed engines, broken fences, and a broken heart. "You start over, sweetheart," I said. "Not from money, not from status. From truth. That's where everything worth building begins." Her eyes filled with tears. She squeezed my hand. "I thought I lost my father that day at the wedding," she whispered. I smiled. "You didn't lose me, Judy. You just had to open your eyes to find me again." That afternoon she moved back into town, renting a small apartment and finding work at a local community center. Sometimes she'd stop by after work with takeout, helping me in the garden or just talking about her mom. Weeks later, I stood by the harbor, the same one where my reputation had once drowned in whispers. Now the air felt cleaner. Fishermen waved as they passed. A few strangers nodded in quiet recognition. The world moves on, but the truth stays. As I leaned on the railing, Judy walked up beside me holding an envelope. "It came for you," she said. I opened it, a letter from the district attorney's office. "Mr. Grant, your cooperation and evidence in the Collins investigation were instrumental. We'd like to invite you to consult on future ethics cases as an advisor." For the first time in years, I laughed, a deep, honest laugh that came from somewhere unbroken. "Looks like retirement didn't last," I said. Judy smiled. "Guess the world still needs my dad after all." We stood there side by side, watching the sunset burn gold across the harbor. For a moment, the water reflected everything perfectly. The wreckage of the past and the peace of what came after. The same place they once mocked me for being a local homeless person was now the ground where their empire fell. The same truth they buried was the truth that buried them. As the last light faded, I whispered to the wind, maybe to Linda, maybe to the world itself. Dignity isn't something they can steal, no matter how hard they try. The waves answered softly, rolling toward the shore. And in that quiet, golden hour, I knew I'd already won, not because they fell, but because I finally stood tall again.